Hi, my name is Cassandra, I'm 28 years old. I never imagined that on the day of my wedding I'd be trembling on the floor while the people who were supposed to be my family stood and watched like I was a stranger. I was never truly part of this family. My stepmother Victoria made that brutally clear from the moment she married my dad when I was 12, just 2 years after my real mom died. My half-sister Vivian was everything I wasn't: loud, flashy, obsessed with designer brands and social media followers, always dating tech entrepreneurs and posting about luxury vacations. And she had a gift for manipulating our parents into believing she was their precious golden child. I, on the other hand, found comfort in quieter pursuits. I worked as a curator at a small but respected museum downtown. I loved ancient artifacts more than trending accessories, scholarly research more than viral content. And that made me the outsider in this reconstructed family. Victoria used to say it with a cold smile, "You'll end up buried in some dusty archive with ink stains on your fingers while Vivian will be running her own empire." And I started to believe her, until I met Ethan. He was gentle, thoughtful, wearing a simple hard hat and work boots at the construction site near my museum. The first time we talked, I noticed his hands, strong, careful, and intelligent. Not the kind of man who spoke to show off, but one who asked real questions. He was working construction, or so he appeared. And honestly, that didn't bother me at all. What mattered was how he treated me like I had something valuable to say, someone worth respecting. For the first time since my mom died, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But deep in my heart, I dreaded what my stepfamily would say, because in their world, love meant nothing without status. Wealth was everything. They expected a man to come with stock options, not a toolbox. A trust fund, not calloused hands. And the man I loved built things with his bare hands and came home covered in dust. Still, when Ethan proposed, I said a yes, without hesitation. I chose love. I chose him, even if it meant facing the people who never really accepted me as family. But what I didn't realize was that the cruelest betrayal of my life wasn't in my past. It was waiting at the very altar where I stood in white. Because on that day, my stepfamily didn't just try to destroy my wedding. They tried to destroy my soul. And that's where my story truly begins. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when I first met Ethan. I had just finished reviewing artifact catalogs at the museum and decided to walk through the construction zone they'd set up around our old wing. A renovation project I usually tried to avoid because of the noise and dust. That day, something made me stop and watch. I stood by the temporary fence, notebook clutched in my hand, observing the workers carefully restoring the century-old brick facade. I was sketching the architectural details when someone approached the fence from the other side. "Excuse me," he said with genuine concern. "You probably shouldn't stand so close to the work area." I looked up. He was striking, but not in an obvious way. His expression was protective, not condescending like most men who tried to tell me what to do. He wasn't mansplaining construction safety, just genuinely worried about my well-being. "I'm sorry," I replied, stepping back. "I work at the museum next door and I was just fascinated by the restoration work." 20 minutes later, he walked over during his break, hard hat in hand. "I saw you sketching earlier," he said with curiosity. "Are you documenting the renovation process?" I smiled. "Something like that. I'm actually researching the building's original architecture for our archives." "That's incredible," he said, his eyes lighting up. "I'm Ethan, by the way." "Cassandra," I said, shaking his dust-covered hand. "Nice to meet you." From that day forward, I found myself taking longer walks past the construction site. Not because I was particularly interested in building work, but because Ethan was there. Over the following weeks, we started having deep conversations during his lunch breaks. He had this quiet intelligence, a way of seeing beauty in old structures that made you appreciate craftsmanship in a whole new way. He talked about preserving history, about the stories that buildings could tell, families who had lived in homes for generations, businesses that had weathered decades of change. He understood legacy, and I was drawn to that. I shared with him my passion for ancient cultures, the museum, and the profound silence of artifacts that hold centuries of human experience. One evening after the work crew had left, we sat together on the museum steps under the streetlights. The autumn air was cool, and I pulled my cardigan tighter. He noticed and moved closer, offering his warmth without saying a word. "You know," he said softly, "I really enjoy our conversations." I looked at him. Even though I spend my days with dusty relics instead of living it up at trendy parties? He laughed gently. "Especially because you find meaning in things that last." And that was the moment my heart opened to him completely. There were no expensive dinners, no flashy displays. Just two people under old lampposts, sharing dreams like they were precious secrets. A few months later, he brought me to a quiet spot overlooking the city and proposed. No diamond ring, no photographer. Just Ethan, a simple silver band, and a nervous, heartfelt "Will you marry me?" And I said a yes, immediately. Because even if he was a construction worker with nothing but integrity to offer, I would choose him every single time. But I knew my stepfamily would never understand. When I told my stepfamily about the engagement, the silence felt like ice forming in my chest. We were sitting in the living room of my dad's house, a place where I had learned to measure every word, like walking through a courtroom where I was permanently on trial. My stepmother Victoria sat rigidly on the leather sofa, crystal wine glass balanced perfectly in her manicured fingers. My dad Franklin barely looked up from his legal briefs, though his pen wasn't moving across the pages. My half-sister Vivian lounged by the marble fireplace, already live-streaming something on her phone, sensing content approaching. "I'm getting engaged," I said, my voice barely steady. Victoria's eyebrow arched with calculated precision. "To whom? That museum director you mentioned once?" "No," I said quietly. "To Ethan." Vivian's head snapped up from her phone, and her perfectly glossed lips curved into a cruel smile. "Wait, Ethan as in the construction guy you've been sneaking around with?" I nodded. "Yes, that's Ethan." Victoria let out a sound that was barely human. "Are you serious, Cassandra? You want to marry a man who carries a lunchbox to work?" "He's more than his job," I replied, trying to keep my voice strong. "He's intelligent, compassionate, genuine." "Broke," Vivian interrupted, not even looking up from typing on her phone. "You forgot completely broke." My hands started shaking. "He treats me like I matter, like I have value. That means more than any trust fund." Dad finally raised his head, his lawyer's stare cutting right through me. "Does he have health insurance? A retirement plan? Any assets whatsoever?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "We're building our life together, and I'm not asking for your permission. I'm informing you." Victoria stood up, beginning her rehearsed performance. "Cassandra, Vivian just signed a brand partnership worth 6 figures. She's building an empire. You're throwing away everything your real mother would have wanted for you on a man who can't even afford to fix his own truck." Vivian looked up with mock sympathy. "Maybe we should have the wedding at the construction site. We could all wear hard hats instead of fancy hats." Victoria's friends, who had been listening from the kitchen, burst into laughter. I felt my face burn with humiliation, but I stood up anyway. I never expected support from people who never saw me as real family. "But I won't let your cruelty poison the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm marrying him, and your opinions can't touch what we have." I walked toward the door, but Victoria's voice followed me like a blade. "Your mom is rolling in her grave watching you disgrace her memory like this." I stopped, my heart breaking, but I didn't turn around. Ethan and I planned a simple, intimate wedding with close friends, a garden venue outside the city, and nothing extravagant. Just love. Still, part of me held on to hope that my family might show up and remember we were supposed to care about each other. I never imagined they'd do something far worse than just staying away. I never imagined they'd come specifically to destroy everything. The morning of our wedding felt suspended in time, like the calm moment when you're holding your breath before diving into deep water. The venue was beautiful, a private garden tucked away from the city noise. Climbing roses wrapped around wooden arbors, simple white chairs were arranged on the grass, and acoustic guitar music floated through the crisp air. The smell of jasmine mixed with morning dew, and for a brief moment, I felt like nothing could penetrate this bubble of happiness. Ethan stood at the altar in a well-fitted charcoal suit, looking at me like I was his entire world. His friends, genuine people with warm smiles, nodded encouragingly as I walked down the aisle. They had embraced me completely, they were celebrating with us, they were here for the right reasons. Then I spotted them. My stepfamily, Victoria in an expensive burgundy dress that announced wealth from across the garden, standing with her signature expression of barely concealed disdain. My dad Franklin, imposing in his tailored suit, scanning the modest setup like he was evaluating evidence. Vivian, dressed like she was attending a Met Gala after party, already positioning her phone for what I feared would be social media content. Sitting next to Bryce, her tech entrepreneur husband, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I refused to let their presence dim my joy. When I reached Ethan, he took my hands with infinite gentleness. His gaze was steady, full of promise. "You're my everything," he whispered. "Let's start our forever." And we did. We spoke our vows under the afternoon sun, promising honesty, partnership, and unwavering support. I looked into his eyes and saw my future. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, my hands shook, not from nerves, but from the profound relief of finally choosing my own happiness. As the ceremony concluded, gentle applause filled the garden. Ethan's friends embraced us warmly. I could see joy in their faces. My stepfamily barely participated. Vivian was definitely recording something. Still, I told myself their presence meant they cared, somehow. A simple white tent sheltered the reception area nearby. Tables were set with candles and wildflower arrangements we'd made ourselves. A curated playlist provided soft background music. No orchestra, no champagne fountain. Just authentic celebration. Ethan and I sat together at the main table. I could sense the tension radiating from my stepfamily's corner, like they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I should have known the hardest part wasn't behind me. Because the real attack, the one that would leave me shattered, humiliated, and questioning everything, was about to unfold. And it would begin with a phone. The sun was beginning to set, painting warm golden light across the garden tent. Joy radiated from Ethan's side of the reception. His friends were raising heartfelt toasts, sharing touching stories, and creating an atmosphere of pure celebration. On my stepfamily's side, cold silence, palpable tension, smiles that looked more like grimaces. Still, I tried to focus on the moment, holding Ethan's hand under the table, whispering gratitude to guests, deliberately ignoring the icy stares from the other side. Then it began. The host approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now hear a few words from the stepmother of the bride, Mrs. Victoria." My blood turned to ice. Ethan squeezed my hand protectively, his eyes asking, "Do you want me to stop this?" I shook my head, though every instinct screamed danger. Victoria rose with theatrical grace, wine glass in hand. Her designer heels clicked deliberately across the wooden platform. She reached the microphone, adjusted her perfectly coiffed hair, and smiled with calculated coldness. "Today," she began, "Franklin's daughter Cassandra starts what I suppose is a new chapter. She's always been unique, academic, impractical." Her voice took on a razor's edge. She never understood the importance of social connections or financial security, while her sister Vivian built a successful brand and married strategically. And Cassandra chose to follow her emotions instead of her brain. The cruelty in her tone was unmistakable now. "I won't pretend this wedding reflects the standards our family maintains, but..." She glanced toward Ethan with disgust. "I suppose love comes in all forms. Even from construction sites and tool sheds." Guests began shifting uncomfortably. Then she raised her glass with mock celebration. "To Cassandra and her blue-collar husband." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Before I could respond, Vivian chimed in from her seat, "At least the honeymoon will be affordable. Maybe a nice trip to Home Depot." Several of her influencer friends snickered. I felt my chest tighten with humiliation. But Victoria wasn't finished. She turned toward Bryce, Vivian's husband, and let out a gasp of horror. "Bryce, where's your phone?" Bryce looked confused, patting his jacket pockets. "My new iPhone? It was right here on the table." "Gone," Victoria repeated with dramatic flair. "It was sitting right there during the ceremony." My heart began racing. She turned slowly to address the entire reception. That phone contains proprietary business information worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I certainly hope no one got carried away with wedding excitement and helped themselves to something that doesn't belong to them. Then she looked directly at Ethan with accusation burning in her eyes. Ethan remained perfectly calm, his expression unchanged. That's enough, I said, rising to my feet. Victoria held up her hand like a traffic cop. No, this is extremely serious. I distinctly saw him near Bryce's table earlier. Didn't you, Vivian? Vivian nodded with practiced innocence.
Yeah.
He was over there getting something. That's what construction workers do, isn't it? Victoria said with fake sweetness. They take things. Oh wait, I forgot, now he's supposedly family. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests stared at Ethan, then at me, then back again. Every gaze felt like a spotlight of judgment. I cannot believe you're doing this, I said, my voice trembling with rage. You orchestrated this entire thing. My dad stood up then, his lawyer's presence commanding the space. We didn't invest in your education and upbringing so you could disgrace our family name, Cassandra. You've married a criminal. I married a good man. I fired back. Something none of you would recognize if it stood right in front of you. But I realized immediately I'd made a mistake. Because in that moment, Dad's face transformed with cold fury, and what he did next would shatter everything I thought I knew about cruelty. The entire garden fell into suffocating silence, the kind of silence that crawls into your lungs and makes it hard to breathe. Dad took a deliberate step forward, his lawyer's composure cracking to reveal something far more sinister. You've embarrassed this family for the last time, he said, his voice low and controlled but vibrating with menace. You've brought disgrace to our name, and now you have the audacity to defend this criminal. Ethan moved closer to me, his presence steady and protective, reaching for my hand. But Dad wasn't focused on Ethan. His cold stare was locked on me. And then he reached into his jacket. I expected him to pull out his phone, maybe his business cards. Instead, he withdrew a thick manila envelope and held it up for everyone to see. My heart stopped beating. Dad, no, I whispered. But before I could say another word, before anyone could intervene, he opened the envelope and began reading in his courtroom voice. Legal notice of inheritance dispute, he announced loudly enough for every guest to hear. Cassandra Marie Thompson, you are hereby notified that your claim to your deceased mother's estate is being contested on grounds of moral unfitness and criminal association. The words hit me like physical blows. Sharp, brutal, designed to destroy. I felt my legs give out, and I sank back into my chair. The world started spinning around me. As of today, Dad continued with surgical precision. All assets previously designated for you, including the trust fund your mother established, will be frozen pending investigation into your association with known criminals. Gasps echoed through the garden. Some guests looked horrified, others confused, all of them staring. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt crushed. Tears started streaming down my face as the full weight of his cruelty hit me. He was using my mom's memory, her love for me, as a weapon. After that, I heard Ethan's voice, but it seemed to come from underwater. He was standing now, his voice sharp with protective fury. Are you completely insane? This is her wedding day. You're attacking your own daughter. I blinked through my tears, struggling to process what was happening. My vision blurred as I saw guests frozen in shock, some starting to leave, others pulling out their phones. I saw Vivian recording everything, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. But mostly I saw Ethan kneeling beside me, his hands gentle on my shoulders, his face filled with concern and rage. He pulled out his phone and dialed quickly. I need legal representation immediately, he said firmly. Someone just used fraudulent legal documents to harass and threaten my wife at our wedding. Then he looked directly at Dad with steel in his voice. You want to play legal games? You want to make accusations? Perfect. Let's see how your law license holds up when I'm done with you. But first, I'm getting my wife away from this toxic situation, and then I'm going to show you exactly who you've decided to mess with. As I felt consciousness slipping away from the emotional shock, I heard Ethan's voice promising, I've got you. They can't hurt you anymore. When I regained awareness, flashing red and blue lights were cutting through the evening darkness. 2 police cruisers had pulled up outside the garden gate, followed by a paramedic vehicle. Uniformed officers and medical personnel were rushing toward our location. Ethan stood firmly beside me, his phone still in his hand, his other arm protectively around my shoulders. She was just emotionally attacked by her own stepfamily, he said with controlled anger. In front of everyone. With legal documents used as weapons. Detective Thompson, a composed woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward to assess the situation. Who made the threats against the bride? Dad remained silent, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Victoria tried to intervene smoothly. This is just a family misunderstanding, she said, stepping forward. Emotions got heated during the celebration. She was sitting peacefully, Ethan interrupted firmly. He pulled out fraudulent legal papers and publicly threatened her inheritance. Multiple guests recorded it. Thompson turned toward my dad. Sir, I need to see those documents immediately. Then Ethan did something that stunned everyone in the garden. He walked to the microphone stand where Victoria had delivered her cruel speech. His voice carried clearly across the reception area. I wasn't planning to reveal this today, but since you've accused me, humiliated me, and now attacked my wife, let me share some facts. The entire reception fell completely silent. Even the police officers paused their work. My name is Ethan Cross. I own Cross Construction Group, one of the largest building companies on the East Coast. I've completed over 20 major projects across 3 states, including the downtown complex where Bryce's company has their headquarters. Bryce's expression went completely blank. I have 0 criminal history. I employ over 600 people. And yes, I work construction sites because I believe in understanding every aspect of my business. He looked directly at Victoria. Cassandra loved me when she thought I was just a worker, which is exactly why she's the only person I trust with my heart. He turned back to Detective Thompson. I'm pressing full charges against her stepfamily for harassment, fraud, and emotional abuse, because what happened here wasn't just cruel. It was criminal. Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. The officers moved forward. Dad, Victoria, and Vivian were each detained, read their rights, and led away in handcuffs. Vivian protested loudly. This is crazy. You're destroying everything. Ethan's expression never wavered. No, you destroyed it yourselves. As the paramedics checked my condition, Ethan stayed close, never releasing my hand. I looked at him through exhausted eyes. You told them who you really are. He nodded gently. No more pretending. As we left that garden behind, I felt protected for the first time in years. The ride to get medical attention passed in a peaceful haze. I rested against Ethan's shoulder while he held my hand securely. Dr. Martinez, a gentle physician, examined me thoroughly and confirmed I was physically unharmed. You're going to be fine, she said reassuringly. The shock was severe, but you're stronger than you think. Strong. That word felt foreign after everything that had happened. At the medical center, they ran tests, monitored my stress levels, and gave me something to help me relax. Ethan remained beside me constantly. He didn't try to fill the silence with unnecessary words. He simply stayed present, and that meant everything. Near midnight, Dr. Martinez returned with discharge papers. You're cleared to go home, she said kindly. Just rest and avoid any stressful situations. I almost smiled. Avoid stress? That ship has sailed. Ethan helped me to his truck, wrapping a warm jacket around my shoulders. I expected us to head to my small studio apartment near the museum. Instead, we drove through neighborhoods I'd only seen in magazines, tree-lined streets, gated communities, houses that looked like architectural masterpieces. Ethan, I whispered, confused. Where are we going? He smiled mysteriously and continued driving until we reached impressive wrought iron gates. They opened automatically as we approached. I sat up in amazement. Beyond the entrance was an estate that took my breath away. Modern design, floor-to-ceiling windows, manicured landscaping, and a circular driveway with a stunning water feature. I stared in disbelief. Whose home is this? Ethan parked and met my eyes. Mine. I couldn't process what I was seeing. He nodded, helping me out of the truck. This is where I actually live. My real home. I gazed at the magnificent structure again. But why didn't you ever bring me here? He guided me toward the entrance with gentle care. Because I needed to know, he said softly, if you loved me for who I am, not what I own. He paused at the doorway, facing me completely. And you did. Even when you thought I had nothing. That's when I knew you were everything. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they were tears of overwhelming gratitude. I took his hand. I still do, I whispered. And I always will. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, filled with beautiful art and the scent of cedar and vanilla. He showed me to a luxurious guest suite that surpassed any hotel I'd ever imagined. As I settled under the silk covers, he sat beside the bed and kissed my forehead. Rest, Cassandra. Tomorrow we start our real life together. And for the first time since the wedding began, I closed my eyes in complete peace. The next morning, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's estate, painting warm gold patterns across the polished hardwood floors. I woke gradually, the emotional exhaustion still heavy but manageable. What lingered most was the hurt in my chest and the newfound determination in my thoughts. Ethan brought me breakfast on a silver tray, herbal tea, buttered croissants, and fresh berries. I could see the protective concern in his expression, but also his unwavering resolve. I contacted my legal team this morning, he said carefully. We have grounds for serious charges. I nodded with growing strength. We have to pursue this. Not just for me, but because they need to learn there are consequences for cruelty. He moved closer. We'll face it together. Within days, our case progressed rapidly with video evidence, witness testimonies, the wedding recordings, and documentation from Dr. Martinez. The proof was overwhelming. Franklin, my dad, was charged with harassment, fraud, and psychological abuse. Victoria, my stepmother, was charged with defamation, conspiracy, and emotional assault. Vivian, my half-sister, was charged as an accomplice to public humiliation and malicious harassment. Their attorney attempted damage control, arguing family disputes, claiming emotional reactions, insisting Victoria was merely expressing concerns. But the judge remained unmoved, as did the jury. When the wedding footage was shown, Dad's legal threats, my breakdown, the calculated cruelty that followed, the courtroom atmosphere grew ice cold. Ethan and I attended every session together. He supported me as I gave testimony, and I supported him when the verdicts were announced. For the crime of fraudulent legal intimidation and emotional abuse, the court finds Franklin guilty. He is sentenced to 3 years in prison and disbarment proceedings. For orchestrated defamation and psychological assault, the court finds Victoria guilty. She is sentenced to 18 months in prison plus mandatory anger management. For participating in planned harassment and public humiliation, Vivian is sentenced to 8 months with additional community service requirements. I didn't weep. I didn't celebrate. I simply took a deep breath. After years of being marginalized, excluded, and treated like an outsider, after being attacked, humiliated, and emotionally destroyed on my wedding day, I finally possessed something they never offered me: justice. Outside the courthouse, media waited, cameras rolled. We remained silent. Ethan wrapped his arm protectively around me and whispered, "This chapter is closed." I looked up at him. "What comes next?" I asked quietly. He smiled warmly. "Now we truly live." A week after the final court session, Ethan led me to the master suite balcony, overlooking the private gardens of his estate. The air smelled like jasmine, the horizon stretched endlessly. Everything felt renewed, as if the darkness had been replaced with pure possibility. "I arranged something special," he said one morning, presenting 2 leather passport holders and travel documents. I looked curious. "Something special?" He grinned. "Just us. No complications, no interference, no lies. A private jet, a mountain retreat, and scenery that will heal your soul." I opened the folder. First-class tickets to the Swiss Alps. I stared at him in amazement. You planned our honeymoon? He shrugged playfully. You survived hell. You deserve paradise. 3 days later, we flew to Zurich and were transported through winding alpine roads to an exclusive mountain resort. Snow drifted softly past enormous picture windows. A stone fireplace warmed our private suite. The world felt peaceful again, and finally, we could exist without the burden of others' judgment. One evening, wrapped in cashmere throws, sharing wine and watching stars appear above snow-covered peaks, I asked him, if you could change anything, would you still have hidden your identity? Ethan considered this carefully, then smiled. Absolutely, because it led me to you. The woman who chose me, fought for me, and stood against everyone, not because I was wealthy, but because I was worthy. I nestled against his chest. We created something more powerful than family bonds, didn't we? He kissed my hair softly. We created authentic love. There, surrounded by mountain silence and far from the toxicity we'd escaped, we laughed without fear, dreamed without limits, and designed our future together. We returned home weeks later, transformed, healed, and purposeful. And though my stepfamily was absent from our lives, I no longer felt incomplete, because the man beside me, the love we'd forged, and the peace we'd earned together were more than enough. And perhaps, just perhaps, that devastating wedding day wasn't an ending at all. It was the first day of everything beautiful.